Hi there, thanks for being here. Have you ever dreamed of moving to a big city all by yourself to chase your dream, only to feel held back by your English? This is how the story starts from fear to fluency, from staying silent to finding your voice. Stay with me till the end, and let me know, have you ever been this scared to speak English in a new place? Chapter 1. The Flight That Changed My Life. I still remember sitting on the plane, heart racing as I looked out the window. It felt like a dream. I was leaving my home in Spain and flying to New York. I didn't know what would happen or if my English was good enough, but I knew I had to try. The flight was long. I couldn't sleep. My mind was full of worries. What if they don't understand me? What if I get lost? I was scared. But under that fear, I also felt hope, excitement, a sense of beginning. Inside my small bag was a notebook, a pen, some clothes, and one big dream. I wanted to speak English and live it fully. When the plane landed, the airport hit me like a wave. Loud voices, fast English signs, and instructions everywhere. My hands were shaking as I passed immigration. "Why are you here?" "How long will you stay?" they asked. I answered slowly, made mistakes, but they smiled and said, "Welcome." That one word helped me breathe again. I stepped outside. Cold air brushed my face. The city was alive, cars, honking people, moving fast, tall buildings like giants. It felt like a movie, but this was real. My new life had begun. In the taxi, the driver asked where to. I showed him my phone. He nodded and drove. Outside, the lights moved quickly. My chest felt heavy, but light at the same time. I was scared, but proud. I had done something brave. At a red light, I saw my reflection in the window. I whispered, "Don't give up. Keep going." That small sentence gave me strength. I didn't need perfect English. I needed courage. The taxi stopped. I paid and stood in front of my new home, an old building. I took a deep breath and walked in. The hall was quiet. I climbed the stairs and found my door. My hands were cold as I knocked. A girl opened the door and smiled. "Hi," she said. "You must be Ariel." I smiled back. "Yes." Her name was Anna. She was from Brazil. Her English wasn't perfect, but she spoke slowly like me. With Anna, I felt safe. She showed me the apartment. It was small but clean. 2 beds, a tiny kitchen, a window facing the street. I sat on my bed and looked around. My new life had begun. That night I couldn't sleep. I thought of home, my family, my friends, and this big new city. But I also thought of tomorrow, my school, my dream. I felt afraid but ready. I opened my notebook and wrote, "This is the first page of my new story." Chapter 2. My first steps in the big city. The next morning I woke up early. I looked out the window. The sky was gray, and the city was already full of life. I heard cars, voices, horns. Everything moved fast. I sat up and took a deep breath. This wasn't Spain anymore. This was real. Anna was already in the kitchen making coffee. She smiled. "Good morning." I smiled back and said the same. We both spoke slowly. Our English wasn't strong, but we understood each other. That was enough. That was beautiful. We sat and talked. She said she came to New York to learn English too. She wanted to work in marketing. I told her I wanted to be a writer. We laughed when we made small mistakes. It felt good. It made me feel safe. After breakfast, I decided to go out and explore. I put on my jacket and shoes, grabbed my phone and some money. I looked at Anna and said, "I go out, just walk, see the city." She nodded and said, "Be careful, take pictures." As I stepped outside, everything felt so big, the streets, the people, the buildings. I looked around and saw so many different faces, so many languages, but mostly English. Everyone moved with purpose. I felt small. I felt slow. But I kept walking. I passed shops and restaurants. Yellow taxis rushed by. A man was selling hot dogs on the street. I walked up to him and said softly, "One hot dog, please." He smiled and asked, "With mustard?" I paused and said, "Yes, mustard." He handed me the hot dog. I paid and said thank you. He replied, "Have a good day." That short exchange was my first real conversation in New York. It was simple, but I felt proud. I kept walking and saw a bookstore. I went inside. The smell of books made me feel calm. I looked at the titles, all in English. I picked up a small book. The words were hard, but I read a few lines. I understood some. That was enough. That was progress. Later, I decided to try the subway. I wanted to learn how to use it. The signs were confusing. So many lines, so many colors. I asked a woman nearby, "Excuse me, this train go downtown?" She smiled. "Yes, next stop is downtown." I thanked her. I felt like a child learning to walk, but I was walking. I was learning. When I came out of the subway, I was near a park. I sat on a bench and watched kids playing people, walking dogs, others reading or talking on the phone. I listened closely to the way they spoke. The words were fast, natural, but I could catch small ones. "Hello, coffee work tomorrow." Slowly, the sounds became more familiar. I opened my phone and messaged, "Anna City is big." I feel lost, but also happy. She replied me too. We learned step by step. That evening, I came home tired but smiling. Anna asked, "How was your walk?" I said, "Many things. Subway, hot dog, park, books." I spoke English. She clapped and said, "Good job." We made dinner just rice and eggs. We talked while cooking. Pass salt. Where is spoon tastes good? We spoke slowly, carefully. We laughed. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Before going to bed, I stood by the window. I looked at the lights of the city. I thought of the airport, the plane, the fear, and now this day, my first real day in New York. I whispered, "I live here now. I can do this." And I smiled because I believed it. Chapter 3. The first day of school. The sunlight touched my face and gently woke me up. My heart felt both heavy and light at the same time. Today was my first day at English school. I stood in front of the mirror and whispered to myself, "You will be okay." I packed a notebook, a pen, and a bottle of water, tied my shoelaces carefully, and put on clean clothes. Anna smiled and said, "Good luck today," I replied. "Thanks. I'm a little nervous." She nodded and said, "Me too. But we will learn." I decided to walk to school. Following the map on my phone, I passed shops opening their doors, children heading to school, and a man playing soft guitar music on the corner. It felt like a quiet welcome. The smell of fresh bread from a bakery made me calm. When I arrived at the school building, I paused. I looked up at the sign, New York Language Center. I touched the door handle and stepped inside. The hallway was full of people, different faces, different languages. I heard accents and laughter. I felt like a small part of something big. A kind woman at the front desk asked my name. "Ariel," I said. She smiled and handed me a paper. "You're in room 3B with Ms. Parker." I thanked her and followed the signs. My feet moved slowly, but my heart raced. In the classroom, a few students were already seated. They looked just as nervous as I felt. One girl was from Japan. A boy was from Egypt. I sat in an empty chair and gave them a small smile. They smiled back. Then Miss Parker walked in, wearing a blue dress and glasses. Her voice was warm and clear. "Good morning, everyone," she said. We all answered good morning. She wrote her name on the board and said, "Welcome to your new English journey." She spoke slowly and used simple words. She made us feel safe. "Here we learn by doing," she said. "We speak, listen, read and write every day." Then she said something important. "Don't be afraid. Mistakes are not bad. They are steps to success." That made me feel better. Then she asked us to introduce ourselves. One by one, students stood and said their name, country, and one thing they liked. When it was my turn, I stood slowly. "Hello, my name is Ariel. I'm from Spain. I like books." Everyone clapped. My face turned red, but I felt proud. Then we played a memory game. We had to say our names and remember something about another student. It was fun. Some people forgot names. Some said the wrong country. But we all laughed. We were not just learning English. We were learning to feel comfortable with each other. Ms. Parker gave us a short reading about a girl who moved to a new city. As I read it, I felt like it was my story, moving, changing, hoping for something better. After the reading, she asked questions. I answered one slowly. She smiled and said, "Well done, Ariel." That moment felt small, but it meant a lot to me. Later, we did a speaking task in pairs. I was with a girl from Japan. Her name was Aiko. We talked about our hometowns. I told her about the sea and Spanish food. She told me about cherry blossoms and snow. Her English was simple like mine. We didn't understand every word, but we understood each other's feelings. When class ended, I stayed a bit longer and looked around. The whiteboard, the chairs, the posters that said things like "practice makes progress." I wanted to remember it all. This was more than a classroom. It was a place where fear slowly turned into hope. Outside, the city kept moving fast, but I walked slower now. Something inside had changed. I had spoken. I had listened. I had learned. And tomorrow I would come back just a little better than today. That night, I told Anna everything about my day. I talked about Ms. Parker, the reading my classmates. She shared her day too. We were on different paths, but we were walking the same direction. Before sleeping, I opened my notebook and wrote, "Today I spoke English." Not perfectly, but I spoke. And that is enough. Chapter 4. The Language of the Streets. The next morning, I woke up early. Outside, the city was already alive. I could hear footsteps, cars' doors, voices. New York never truly sleeps. I looked at my phone. No class today. It was a holiday. I had the whole day to explore. I grabbed my jacket, shoes, a small map, and stepped out. The air was cool and full of smells, coffee smoke, bread, something sweet. The streets were busy. Everyone had a place to go. I just wanted to walk and listen. Turning a corner, I found a small bakery. I walked in. A woman behind the counter smiled and said, "Hi, what can I get you?" My mind went blank for a moment. I pointed at something and said, "One, this please." She laughed gently. "One croissant?" I nodded. "Yes, croissant." Then she asked, "Anything to drink?" I replied, "Coffee, small, milk." She smiled. One small coffee with milk coming up. She understood me. That small success made me feel happy. I sat by the window and watched people passing by, walking fast, talking into phones, wearing headphones, pushing strollers. Everyone was speaking English. I listened closely. I caught small phrases. "Morning. You got it? Let's go. No worries." These short phrases were like puzzle pieces. I saved them in my mind. After breakfast, I tried the subway again, this time without using my phone. I studied the map. It looked like a giant spider web. I found my stop and followed the signs. A woman with a baby was asking a man for directions. Take this train. Next stop. Upstairs. I understood every word. I smiled. I was learning from real people. On the train, someone was listening to music, a song in English. I paid attention to the lyrics, something about dreams, about love, about starting again. The rhythm helped. English with music felt smoother, softer. I got off at a new neighborhood. I didn't know the name, but I liked the colors and the street art. There were small cafes and a quiet library. I walked in. Inside, a woman was reading a story to children. Her voice was calm, slow, full of feeling. I stood in the back and listened. I understood more than I expected. The story was simple. A boy finds a dog, helps it, and finds a friend. The kids laughed. I smiled too. Stories had power. Simple words, but deep meaning. After the library, I walked into a store to buy toothpaste. I asked a man, "Where is toothpaste?" He looked confused for a second, then smiled. "Aisle 4, near the shampoo." I found it and said, "Thank you." Little by little, I was using English in real life. At lunchtime, I stopped at a food truck. There was a short menu. I practiced silently. Can I have... When it was my turn, I said, "Can I have a chicken sandwich and water, please?" The man nodded and said, "Sure, buddy." That word buddy felt warm. I smiled. I sat nearby, ate my sandwich, and wrote in my notebook. Today, I used English in a bakery, subway, library, and store. It wasn't perfect, but people understood. That's what matters. That sentence made me feel strong. In the afternoon, I walked through a busy market. People shouted prices. $2. Half off fresh apples. I didn't buy anything. I just listened. Every sound, every voice, every sign, it felt like a class without walls. I didn't need a teacher. The streets were teaching me now. As the sun went down, I walked home. My feet were tired, but my heart was full. Today, I didn't just speak English, I lived it. The fear was still there, small and quiet. But something else was growing. Confidence, trust, in myself, in my voice, in the journey. That night, Anna asked, "What did you do today?" I said I spoke to strangers. I bought coffee. I asked questions. I listened. She clapped and said, "You're getting stronger." I nodded. The streets are hard, but they teach. Before sleeping, I opened my notebook again. I wrote one more line. The real classroom is everywhere if I keep my ears open and my heart brave. Chapter 5. The Power of Practice and Pasta. That evening, after walking through the city, I came home feeling tired, but in a good way. The kind of tired that comes after learning something new, something real. Anna was already in the kitchen holding a bag of groceries. "Let's cook something," she said. "Something easy." I nodded. "Pasta." She smiled. "Perfect." We placed the ingredients on the table: pasta, tomatoes, garlic, salt, cheese. Very simple. But to us, it felt special, like preparing for a big dinner party. Not because the food was fancy, but because we made a decision to speak only English while cooking. No Spanish, no Portuguese. Only English, no matter how slow or silly it might sound. I pointed and said, "Can you give me the, red thing?" Anna laughed. "Tomato." "Yes, tomato," I said proudly. Then she challenged me. "Your turn. Ask me something." She pointed to the stove. "Can you, turn on the fire?" I smiled and said, Yes. I turn on the heat. We both laughed. It felt like a game fun light, but meaningful. Every word, every sentence was part of our progress. As we cooked, we practiced new vocabulary, boil, chop, stir, taste. These words weren't in our school books, but they were real, and they stayed in our memory because we used them. While the sauce was bubbling, I took a breath and said, "Smells good." Anna nodded. "Better than school lunch," I added. "It smells like home." That sentence made us both pause. It felt warm, like something more than just a sentence. It made our little kitchen feel full of heart. We set the table and served the pasta. I poured water into 2 glasses. "To learning," I said. "To speaking," Anna replied. We clinked glasses like grown-ups. The pasta was soft. The sauce was a little sweet. Not perfect, but full of love and language. During dinner, we asked each other questions all in English. What's your favorite food? Where do you want to travel? What job do you want? Sometimes we paused to think. Sometimes we chose the wrong words. But we never laughed at each other, only with each other. That made all the difference. After eating, we cleaned the dishes, still speaking English. Pass the soap. Rinse the plate. This spoon is slippery. Even small things became part of our learning. We were no longer just students. We were becoming speakers. Later, we sat by the window and watched the lights of the city, the cars, the buildings, the voices below. I said, "I feel good today." Anna smiled and said, "Me too," she added. Not just because of the food, but because we spoke English a lot. I nodded and said, "And we didn't care if it was perfect." Then she said something I'll never forget. Practice is not just in school. It's in the kitchen, in the park, in the little things. That's how we grow. I smiled. Yes, we speak it. We live it. Before bed, I opened my notebook and wrote, "We cooked pasta." But really, we were cooking confidence, one sentence at a time. Then I added another line. Don't wait for the classroom. Every moment is practice if your heart is open and your mouth is brave. That night I slept well. Not just because I was tired, but because I knew something important. My English was growing not loudly, but quietly, gently. Through pasta, through laughter, and through practice. Chapter 6. When listening feels impossible. The next morning at school, Ms. Parker walked into class carrying a small speaker. She smiled and said, "Today we will practice listening." As soon as I heard those words, something turned in my stomach. Listening was always the hardest part for me. Speaking was scary too, but at least I could choose my words. With listening, I had no control. It felt like a fast-moving storm of sounds I couldn't catch or hold. Ms. Parker placed the speaker on her desk and pressed play. A voice started 2 people speaking in English. I tried to follow, but after a few seconds, I was completely lost. The words all blended together. I caught maybe 5 out of 50. Hello, coffee, busy. That was it. The rest felt like wind in my ears, quick and gone. She stopped the audio and asked the class, "What did you hear?" A few students raised their hands. Maria said, "They talked about a meeting." Ahmed said, "Something about lunch." I looked down at my notebook. Nothing. Just a blank page. I felt small and slow. My heart dropped. But then Ms. Parker gave us a kind smile and said gently, "Let's try again. Just write 1 or 2 words this time. Don't try to get everything she said. Just catch what you can." She played the audio again. I closed my eyes and listened hard. This time I caught 1 full sentence. "Let's meet at the cafe at noon." It was still difficult, but at least now I had something. A full sentence, a piece of the puzzle. That gave me a little hope. She played the audio again, a third time, then a fourth. Each time, I understood a bit more. Slowly, the sounds became words. The words became ideas. It was like learning to see underwater. At first, all I saw were shapes and motion. But after a while, I noticed details: a cup, a table, a smile, a voice. After the fifth time, I wrote in my notebook, "They are friends. They meet at a cafe." It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. My own understanding. That made me feel proud. Ms. Parker turned to the class and said, "Listening takes time. You won't understand everything right away. But you will if you keep trying." That sentence stayed in my mind all day. It felt like a seed growing slowly. After class, she gave us a worksheet. We had to match sentences to pictures. One picture showed a man talking on the phone. One showed a girl ordering coffee. Another showed two friends laughing. I smiled. These were the people I had just met through sound. Later that day, I walked to a nearby coffee shop. I didn't bring a book. I didn't bring headphones. I just sat down and listened. No studying, no pressure, just listening. Behind me, two people were talking about their weekend. I didn't understand it all, but I caught some words. Movie night. Too much rain. Let's go again next Friday. I didn't write anything down. I didn't translate. I just let the English flow into my ears. I closed my eyes and listened like a child listens to music. I realized something: I didn't have to understand everything. I only needed to stay open and let the sounds come in. That was already helping. That evening, Anna and I sat together and watched a short video, a cooking show in English. She smiled and said, "Let's try this we watch once with subtitles, then again without." I agreed. We played the video. It was 5 minutes long. The host spoke quickly, but with the subtitles, I followed along. Then we watched again without them. This time it was harder, but I wasn't as scared. Some words now felt familiar. Some sentences made sense. The sound of English didn't feel like a storm anymore. After the video, we paused and repeated one sentence out loud. First, chop the onion into small pieces. I said it slowly, then again. Anna did the same. We smiled. It was fun. It didn't feel like homework. It felt like we were really learning by doing. Before going to sleep, I opened my notebook again. I wrote today. I didn't understand everything, but I understood more than yesterday. And tomorrow, I will understand even more. Then, just for myself, I added one last line. When listening feels impossible, listen anyway. Words grow inside you even when you don't notice. Chapter 7. A Weekend of Discovery. Saturday morning arrived with soft sunlight streaming through the window. The city felt calmer than usual. There were no alarms ringing, no rush to get somewhere, just a peaceful morning and the promise of a new weekend waiting to begin. Anna knocked gently on my door. "Let's go somewhere," she said with a grin. I sat up and asked, "Where to?" She shrugged and replied, "Anywhere. We explore." There was no plan, just two friends. A subway map, our phones, and the shared excitement of discovering something new. We grabbed water bottles, snacks, and most importantly, our courage, the courage to speak English with strangers if we needed to. Even though the streets were already busy, the mood was different from a weekday. There were more families, tourists, and children around. The whole city felt more relaxed. As we walked, I could feel it. We weren't just visitors anymore. We were part of the rhythm, part of the weekend crowd. Our first stop was Times Square. I had seen it in so many movies, but this time, I was standing right in the middle of it. Giant screens lit up the buildings with flashing colors. Huge crowds moved like waves flowing in every direction. People were laughing, taking selfies, watching street performers. Everywhere I looked, there was English in the signs, the music, the ads. I read slowly, Sail, Broadway. Next show at 7 p.m. Each word felt like a tiny English lesson in motion. Anna looked up and said, so bright I laughed and answered, too many lights for morning. Our sentences were simple, but we weren't afraid to speak anymore. That alone felt like a personal victory. We spotted a street vendor selling keychains. I thought of my sister back home and decided to buy one. How much is this? I asked. The man replied, 3 for 10. I paused and asked, can I get only one? He smiled and said, sure, $4. I paid and thanked him. It wasn't a long conversation, but I felt proud. I didn't need perfect grammar, just courage to connect. From Times Square, we walked to Central Park. Trees surrounded us. The grass was green. A lake sparkled nearby. It was like stepping into a quieter, greener version of the city. We sat on a bench and watched the world pass by. People jogged painted red books. The park was full of peaceful energy. Near the lake, a man was sketching in a notebook. I gathered my courage and asked, you draw this every day? He looked up, smiled and said almost, it helps me relax. I nodded and told him, it's beautiful. That short exchange stayed with me, natural, simple, meaningful. We kept walking and soon found ourselves near the Museum of Modern Art. Let's go in, Anna suggested. I agreed. We bought tickets and stepped into a quiet world filled with color and creativity. Inside, it felt like the art wanted us to listen. One room had a painting by Van Gogh swirling stars in a deep blue sky. A sign next to it read, Starry Night. I read the English description slowly. It mentioned feelings, color, and dreams. I didn't understand every word, but the painting spoke to me in a way language sometimes can't. I turned to Anna and whispered, this painting speaks without words. She nodded and said, art is another language. We wandered through more galleries. Some art was strange, some beautiful, some confusing. We stopped at each piece, read the English labels, and learned new words. Abstract exhibit installation. We didn't know them all, so we wrote them down in our phones to study later. But even without full understanding, our eyes and hearts were learning something important. When we finally stepped outside, the sun was beginning to set. The city lights were turning on one by one. Anna said, I feel tired, but happy. I smiled. Today was full of walking, full of English, full of discovery. On the subway ride home, we didn't talk much. We just sat quietly, thinking about our day. I scrolled through the photos I had taken Times Square, the lake, the Van Gogh painting, the little keychain. They weren't just pictures. They were memories of learning and growing. Back home, we made simple sandwiches for dinner. As we ate, we talked softly about the museum. I want to go again, Anna said. I nodded. Yes, maybe next time. We speak to the guide. She laughed and replied, let's practice more first. Before going to sleep, I opened my notebook and wrote, today I listened with my eyes. I spoke with confidence. I read with patience. I used English in the world, and the world answered. Then I added one more thought. Learning happens when you move, when you go outside, when you see, when you try. Today wasn't just a lesson, it was a discovery. Chapter 8, My First English Journal. The next morning, I woke up later than usual. The weekend had been full of new experiences and my body needed time to rest. I stayed in bed for a few more minutes, letting my mind wander through the memories, Times Square, the peaceful park, the swirling painting the English words I tried to understand. My heart was still full, and I didn't want those moments to fade away. I got up and made myself a warm cup of tea. The apartment was quiet. Anna was still asleep. Outside, the city seemed to take a breath too slower, softer than normal. As I sat at the table, a quiet feeling came over me. I heard a little voice inside whispering, "Write it down." So I opened my notebook, turned to a fresh page, and at the very top I wrote the title, My First English Journal. At first, I didn't know where to begin. The page looked empty. My mind felt unsure. My English was not strong, and I didn't know many words. But I remembered something Miss Parker once said, "Use what you know, not what you don't." That gave me courage. So I began with one simple sentence. Yesterday, I go to Times Square. I stared at it for a second. Something felt off. I smiled to myself. I knew go was the wrong word. I quickly searched on my phone past tense of go. The answer appeared went. I crossed out go and wrote went instead. Now the sentence read, Yesterday I went to Times Square. That small change filled me with confidence. I had corrected it myself. I had learned something. I kept going. I wrote the lights were big. The people were many. I buy a keychain. I eat a sandwich. I talk to a man who draw in the park. Then I paused. Those verbs again buy, eat, draw. I needed their past forms. Slowly, I looked them up and fixed the sentences. I bought a keychain. I ate a sandwich. I talked to a man who was drawing in the park. It took time, but I enjoyed it. I wasn't just writing. I was learning from myself. Soon, Anna woke up and walked into the room. She saw me sitting at the table, notebook open. "What are you doing?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "Writing?" "In English," I said. She smiled and sat beside me. "Can I read?" I handed her the notebook. She read it slowly, nodding. "Very good," she said. Then she added something I loved. "It's not perfect, but it's real." I closed the notebook and said, "That's enough for today." But inside I felt something had begun. That little book had become more than paper and ink. It was now my friend, my mirror, my secret map. I knew I would keep writing, maybe just a little every day, but I would keep going. That week in class, Miss Parker said something that stayed with me. If you want to remember a word, she told us, use it. Write it. Speak it. Make it part of your story. That's when I realized my journal wasn't just a notebook. It was my private classroom, a space for my mistakes, a space for my growth. That evening, I wrote again. I chose 5 new words from my day-busy crowd museum relax window. I made a sentence for each one. The street is busy. I see a big crowd in the square. The museum is quiet. I relax in the park. I sit near the window and read. These were simple, short lines, but they felt powerful because they came from me. I wasn't copying a lesson. I was writing real things from my life. Anna liked the idea. She started a journal too. It became a nightly habit for us. After dinner, we would sit at the kitchen table with tea and our notebooks. Sometimes we read one sentence out loud. Sometimes we corrected each other. Sometimes we just smiled and said, "Good job." There was no pressure, only support, only practice. One night, Anna wrote, "Today I am tired, but I feel proud." I looked at her and said, "That's beautiful." She replied, "It's the truth." And that's when I realized something new English isn't only about grammar or vocabulary. It's about expressing what's real, what you feel, what you think, what you see. Before I went to bed that night, I opened my journal again. I wrote a short letter. It was not for a person, but for English itself. Dear English, you're not easy, but you're kind. You give me new ways to speak. You show me how strong I can be. I will not stop, even when I feel slow. Your friend Ariel. When I closed the notebook, I felt something deep inside, a quiet peace, a small flame of pride. I whispered to myself, I may not speak like a native, but I write like a learner who loves to learn. Chapter 9, Looking for a Job, Looking for Courage. One quiet morning, Anna and I were sitting at the breakfast table. We had just finished our eggs and toast when she looked at me seriously and said, I want to find a job. I didn't answer right away. I looked down at my hands. A job in English where we had to talk to real people and make real mistakes. The idea scared me, but strangely it also made my heart beat faster. I nodded slowly. Yes, me too. It felt like the right time. We couldn't hide in the classroom forever. Sooner or later, we had to step into the world even if we failed. That afternoon, we sat together and opened our laptops. We typed carefully jobs and cafe jobs for students, jobs no experience. Each search gave us new vocabulary: barista, cashier, shift, resume. Some words we didn't understand, so we read slowly, line by line. I asked Anna, what is flexible hours? She looked it up and said, it means your work time can change. I nodded. Good word. We started building a list jobs. We liked places nearby. And then came the big step, writing our resumes in English. It felt strange, even a little funny, trying to describe ourselves in a language we were still learning. But we gave it our best. Name, contact, skills. I typed, I can speak English. That sentence felt both true and untrue at the same time, but we left it there. The next day, we printed our resumes and stepped outside. The city looked different now. It wasn't just a place for sightseeing anymore. It was a place to ask, to try to take chances. We walked into small cafes, bakeries, bookstores, and asked the same question over and over again. Hello, are you hiring? Some people shook their heads and said, no, sorry. Some took our paper and smiled. A few just nodded. We'll call you. After 10 places, our feet were sore. After 15, our voices were tired. But we didn't stop. Every no felt like a small push forward. At one cozy cafe, a woman behind the counter looked at me carefully and said, come back tomorrow for an interview. I froze for a second. Interview, I repeated. She smiled. Yes, bring yourself. That's enough. I thanked her again and again. My heart was racing. When we left the cafe, I turned to Anna. She had the biggest smile. We did it, she said. I smiled back. Not yet, but maybe soon. That evening, we practiced common interview questions. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table and took turns. Tell me about yourself. Why do you want this job? What are your strengths? Our answers were simple, sometimes wrong, but we corrected each other and kept going. Anna said, you are kind and calm. That's a strength. I said, you are brave. You speak even when you're not sure. We were helping each other grow, not just for a job, but for real life. The night before the interview, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling in the dark. My thoughts were loud. What if I forget the words? What if I don't understand? What if they laugh at me? Then I remembered something Ms. Parker once said. Your job is not to be perfect. Your job is to be ready. I kept repeating it to myself, like a quiet song. Slowly, my breathing softened, and I fell asleep. The next morning, I wore my cleanest shirt and fixed my hair. Anna helped me practice one last time. Speak slowly, she said. Smile. Be you. I nodded. I'll try. Then I left the apartment, walked to the cafe, and stepped inside. I told the manager my name, and she led me to a small table. She sat across from me. Her eyes were kind. She asked questions, and I answered as best as I could, short, simple sentences. I came to New York to learn English. I want to work here to practice speaking. I'm a good listener, and I work hard. She smiled. That's great. Thank you for coming. I stood up, shook her hand, and said, Thank you for the chance. As I walked out the door, the sun was shining, and my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from everything I was feeling at once. When I got home, I told Anna everything. She listened closely and nodded. You did your best, she said softly. Now, we wait. That night, we made dinner together, pasta and vegetables, and something inside me felt different. It wasn't fear. It wasn't nervousness. It was something softer, something stronger. It was courage, the quiet kind, the kind that grows when you do something hard. And don't run away from it. Before bed, I opened my journal and wrote, Today, I ask the world to see me not as perfect, just as someone who is trying. That is enough. Then I added another line just for myself. Courage is not loud. It is the small voice that says, I will try again tomorrow. Chapter 10. My first job interview. The next morning began in complete silence. No alarms ringing, no birds singing, just the quiet sound of my own breathing. I woke up before sunrise. Sleep was no longer possible. Today was the day I had been thinking about for weeks. My very first job interview, and it would all be in English. My heart was already pounding, and I was still in bed. I sat up slowly and looked at the notebook on my table. It was open to a page where I'd written some practice questions the night before. I picked one. Why do you want this job? I whispered my answer aloud. I want this job because I want to speak more English, and I like helping people. My voice trembled, but it was real. It was mine. Soon after Anna woke up, she saw me sitting there quietly and gave me a thumbs up. You got this, she said. I tried to smile back. Deep inside, I wasn't sure. I went to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. I straightened my shirt and combed my hair. Then I whispered to my reflection, Today is not about being perfect. It's about being brave. That one sentence gave me the push I needed. We had breakfast together, just toast and tea. I couldn't eat much. My stomach felt too tight. Anna looked calm, but she had her own interview that day too. Aren't you scared? I asked. She said yes, but I'm doing it anyway. That answer stayed with me. It became my strength as I prepared to leave. At 10:30, I stepped outside. The sky was cloudy and the wind was cool. I walked slowly, one step at a time. My head was full of questions. Will they understand me? Will I forget my words? Will I freeze? I clutched my notebook inside my bag. I didn't plan to open it, but holding it made me feel safe. It was a reminder of how far I had come. I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early. I stood outside for a moment and watched people going in and out. Some laughed, some talked. The smell of coffee drifted through the air, warm, strong, familiar. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The manager, Lucy, was at the counter. She saw me and smiled kindly. Hi, Ariel, right? I nodded. Yes. Thank you for this opportunity. She walked out and invited me to sit at a small table. The cafe was active, but not too noisy. She opened a folder and began asking questions. Her voice was calm and friendly. Not too fast, not too slow, just right. Tell me about yourself, she said. I sat up straight and said, I'm Ariel. I'm from Spain. I came to New York to learn English. I want to work here, to practice speaking and learn more. She nodded and smiled again. Great. Have you worked in a cafe before? I shook my head. No, but I can learn fast. I work hard. I like helping people. She jotted something down and asked, "What are your strengths?" I paused, then looked up and said, "I stay calm. I listen. I try again if I make mistake." She smiled warmly. "That's important." The interview continued. She asked more questions. I answered each one carefully. My grammar wasn't perfect. I mixed up some words, but I stayed calm. I kept smiling. I didn't stop. And Lucy kept listening with patience and kindness. At the end, she looked at me and said, "You know what I like about you, Ariel?" I blinked. What she said, "You're honest, and you're trying. That's what matters here." Then she added something that made my heart skip. "We'd like to give you a trial shift, just to see how things go." I stared at her in surprise. "Really?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes. Can you come next Monday, 9 a.m.? I took a breath and said, "Yes, I will be here." I stood up, shook her hand, and thanked her again. As I walked outside, the clouds had shifted. The sun was shining through. I looked up at the sky. My chest felt light. I had just done something that terrified me, and I did it in English. It wasn't just pride I felt. It wasn't just happiness. It was something deeper, something stronger. I had faced fear and didn't run. I walked home with a quiet smile. When I opened the door, Anna was sitting on the couch. She looked up and asked, "Well, I didn't speak at first. I just raised my hand like a champion and said, 'Trial shift.'" She jumped up and hugged me. "You did it." I asked, "What about you?" She grinned. "Me too. Interview tomorrow." That evening, we made dinner together. And as we cooked, we talked about everything, not just what we said in our interviews, but how we felt. The nervous hands, the deep breaths, the moment we chose to keep going even when we were scared. These were more than English lessons. They were lessons about courage. Later that night, before I went to sleep, I opened my notebook and wrote, "Today I spoke English in my fear." And it listened. And it said yes. Then I added one more line. "Courage is speaking slowly in front of someone who could say no and smiling anyway." Chapter 11, From Learner to Worker. Monday morning came faster than I expected. I woke up before the alarm even rang. My body felt nervous, but my mind was set. Today wasn't just any day, it was my very first work shift at the cafe. This was the moment I would stop being only a student and start becoming a worker in the real world. Standing in front of the mirror, I put on my cleanest shirt and tried to make my hair neat. I practiced a smile and whispered to myself, "You can do this. Don't try to be perfect. Just be yourself." Anna passed by and gave me a quick thumbs up. She had her own interview that day, and her quiet support made me feel brave, like I wasn't alone. The walk to the cafe felt longer than usual. I counted my steps, trying to calm my nerves. In my head, I repeated useful English phrases again and again. "Would you like anything else? Do you want milk or sugar? Your total is $5. My mind was full of words. My hands were cold, but deep down I was ready to try. When I arrived, Lucy, the manager, smiled and waved me to the back. "Ready for your first day?" she asked. "Yes," I replied, even though I felt shaky inside. She gave me a quick tour, where to put my bag, how to clean the counter, where the coffee beans were, how to greet the customers. The list felt endless, but I listened closely, not wanting to miss a thing. Another worker, Jamie, stepped in to help. He spoke fast but kindly. "Don't worry," he said. "We all make mistakes. Just smile and stay calm." His words meant more to me than he probably realized. Then the door opened, and customers began coming in. At first I just watched from the back. But soon Lucy said, "Ariel, take the next order." My feet froze for a second. Then I nodded and stepped forward. A woman walked up and said, "Hi, can I get a medium latte with almond milk?" My brain raced. Medium latte, almond milk. I smiled and repeated, "One medium latte with almond milk." She smiled back. "Yes." I carefully pressed the buttons on the machine and asked Jamie for help. I steamed the milk, poured the coffee, and handed her the cup. "Here is your coffee. Have a nice day." She thanked me and walked away. I had done it. One real customer, one real order, one real success. As the morning continued, I took more orders. Some people spoke clearly. Some spoke quickly. Some were in a rush. Some were friendly and patient. I made small mistakes. I forgot a sugar packet. I gave someone the wrong size cup. But no one got upset. I apologized. They smiled. I fixed it and learned from it. Each moment, I felt myself changing, not just as a student, but as someone who belonged. During lunch break, Jamie and I sat outside for a few minutes. He asked, "How's your first day going?" I smiled and said, "Hard, but good." He nodded. "That's how it starts." We both laughed, and for the first time that day, I felt relaxed. After the break, I wiped tables, restocked napkins, and greeted more customers. I started remembering useful words without even trying. For here or to go. We have oat milk and soy milk. That'll be $7.50. Every sentence made me feel a little stronger, a little more confident. At the end of my shift, Lucy called me to the back room. "Good job today," she said. "You stayed calm and listened carefully. That's more important than being fast." I thanked her with a big smile. She looked at the schedule. "Can you come again Thursday?" My heart jumped. "Yes," I said. "I can come." As I walked home, my legs felt heavy and my feet were sore. My shirt had a small coffee stain, but none of that mattered. I had done something I once thought was impossible. I had worked in English. When I opened the door, Anna greeted me with a big grin. "Tell me everything," she said. I sat down and told her the whole story. The customers, the mistakes, the kind woman who smiled at me the moment Lucy asked me to return. Anna clapped her hands in excitement. Then she said, "I start tomorrow." I gave her a high five and said, "You're going to do great." That night, I was too tired to write a full journal entry, but I opened the notebook and wrote one big sentence across the page. Today, I worked in English, not perfectly, but honestly, and that is enough. Then I added one more thought underneath: real learning begins when you stop being only a learner and start becoming a doer. Chapter 12. New friends. New confidence. The days that followed went by quickly. I returned to the cafe for my next shift, and this time, something felt different. I was still nervous, but not frozen. My hands sometimes trembled, but my voice was steady. Each time I greeted a customer, the words came out smoother. "Good morning. What can I get for you?" started to roll off my tongue. "Would you like cream or sugar?" sounded less like a line I memorized and more like something natural. It was like the English I once feared was now becoming part of me. I still made small mistakes. I still had to ask Jamie for help now and then. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was trying, and that effort gave me strength I hadn't felt before. At school, something else changed. During group activities, I found myself speaking more. I asked my classmates questions. I explained my thoughts using the words I knew. One day, Ms. Parker smiled at me and said, "Ariel, your confidence is growing." That one short sentence felt like a prize. Not for speaking perfectly, but for trying again and again, even when I was unsure. One afternoon after class, Maria from Mexico came over to me and asked, "Do you want to study together?" I smiled and said, "Yes, I do." We found a quiet corner in a nearby coffee shop and helped each other practice questions in English. We laughed when we both mixed up in and at. It didn't feel like studying. It felt like something more. It felt like friendship. Back at the cafe, I also began to speak more, not just with customers, but with the people I worked with. Jamie and I joked while preparing drinks. One day, I handed him a cappuccino, and he asked, "You making art with the foam again?" I replied, "It's modern art." We both laughed. Slowly, other workers started joining our conversations. Emily, one of the girls there, loved reading. We talked about books during breaks. I told her I was learning English because I wanted to be a writer someday. She looked at me and said, "That's awesome. One day I'll read your book." Her words stayed with me like a little light glowing in my heart. Bit by bit, my fear started to melt. It didn't disappear completely, but it softened. I started recognizing regular customers and greeting them with a smile. "One black coffee, no sugar." "Right," I said to Mr. Johnson, an older man who came in every morning. He nodded and said, "You're learning fast. New York is lucky to have you." I thanked him, and this time my voice didn't shake. Even at home, I noticed a difference. Anna and I made a small rule: no more speaking in our native languages. Only English, even when we were tired, even when it would have been easier to stop. We talked about our days, our dreams, and even silly things like favorite snacks and songs. Some conversations were funny, some were serious, but all of them helped us improve. One evening, we invited Maria and Hiroshi over for dinner. We cooked rice bean salad and served tea. We put on music, shared stories, and spoke only in English. Everyone made an effort to speak slowly. Everyone listened carefully. When someone made a mistake, no one laughed. We corrected each other gently. We helped one another. The room felt warm, not just because of the food, but because we were learning together. That night, after our friends had gone home, I stood by the window and looked at the glowing city lights. I remembered the person I was when I first arrived, quiet, afraid, and unsure. But now, something inside me had changed. I was still learning, I was still growing, but I wasn't the same anymore. I had a voice now. I had friends. I had confidence I didn't know I could find. Before going to bed, I opened my journal and wrote, "Today, I used English not to pass a test, but to connect, to laugh, to live." Then I added another line underneath: "Fluency is not just in grammar. It's in the friendships you build. It's in the smile that comes after saying something you once thought you couldn't." Chapter 13, A Walk Through Culture. One morning at school, Ms. Parker walked in with a cheerful smile and a small box in her hands. She stood at the front of the classroom and announced, "Today we're doing something special." Everyone sat up curious. We were used to grammar drills and listening practice, but something about her expression told us this day would be different. She opened the box and pulled out a small flag. "This is my country's flag," she said. Then she turned to the board and wrote 3 simple words: culture, story, and share. She continued, "This Friday we'll have a cultural exchange day. You can bring something from your country, food, music, photos, or a memory, and tell us about it in English." As soon as I heard that, my stomach tightened. Speak in front of everyone again. Share something personal. But then I remembered how proud I felt after my job interview. Nervous? Yes, but proud. Maybe this was another chance to grow. That afternoon, I told Anna about the idea. She lit up with excitement. "I'll bring brigadeiros," she said. "They're sweet chocolates from Brazil. Everyone will love them. I smiled. I'll bring Tehran. It's a traditional Spanish candy. Anna nodded. Great choice. What will you talk about? I paused. Maybe La Tomatina. She laughed. The tomato fight. That's perfect. During the week, I prepared little by little. I printed 2 pictures of La Tomatina, one with people throwing tomatoes and one showing everyone covered in red. I also wrote a short speech in my journal and practiced it out loud every day. Hello, my name is Ariel. Today I will talk about a special festival in Spain called La Tomatina. I read it again and again. I simplified sentences, corrected mistakes, and timed myself. I even recorded my voice so I could listen and improve. Slowly, my nervousness started to fade. I wasn't perfect, but I was ready. On Friday, I woke up early. I packed my sweets in a box and carefully folded the photos. When I arrived at school, the classroom had transformed. Flags from many countries were hanging. Music played softly. Tables were filled with colorful dishes and treats. Hiroshi brought sushi. Maria brought tacos. Ahmed had falafel. Anna's tray of brigadeiros looked perfect, and I placed my Tehran next to it. Ms. Parker smiled and said, "Today you are travelers not by plane, but by story. Let's begin." One by one, we went up to the front to share. Everyone spoke slowly and simply. Nobody laughed. Nobody judged. We listened with open hearts. We clapped after every speaker. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath, picked up my photos, and walked to the front. Hello, my name is Ariel. I'm from Spain. Today I will talk about La Tomatina. As I began, something shifted. My shoulders relaxed. My voice grew stronger. I shared how people throw tomatoes in the streets, how the tradition began by accident, and how it became a celebration of fun and connection. I showed my pictures and even told a story from when I was a child. At the end, I smiled and said, "It's messy, but it brings people together, just like English does." The room clapped warmly. Ms. Parker said, "Beautiful." Thank you, Ariel. I returned to my seat with a full heart, not because I had spoken perfectly, but because I had shared something real, a part of my home, and they had listened. After all the presentations, the classroom turned into a small party. We tasted each other's food. We asked questions. What is this made of? Is this spicy? What does this song mean? We spoke only in English. Not perfectly, but with joy. The room was filled with energy, not noise, but life. I looked around and saw people smiling, laughing, and dancing. And I thought, this is what English is for. When I got home, I wasn't tired. I felt awake and full of life. I looked at my photos again and ate another piece of Tehran. Then I opened my journal and wrote, "Today I spoke about my country." And through that, I felt more connected to the world. Then I added, language is not just grammar. It is a bridge between hearts, between memories, between cultures. Chapter 14, The Day I Taught Something. After the cultural exchange, something felt different. It was like a quiet shift inside me, like I no longer felt like just a student. I felt like someone who had something to say, someone with a voice, someone who could give, not only receive. I think Miss Parker noticed it too, because one morning she shared an announcement that surprised us all. Next week, she said, we're starting an English book circle. Each of you will choose a short story. In English, read it and share something you learned. No test, no big speech, just a reflection, something honest and real. Her words stuck with me. This wasn't about grades. It was about connection. I felt my heart shift again. I had read a few English stories since arriving in New York, simple ones, mostly children's books and beginner readers. But there was one story I kept thinking about. It was about a lonely boy who planted a tree. The words were easy, but the meaning went deep. It stayed in my mind long after I finished it, so I chose that story. All week I read it again and again. I underlined words that spoke to me. I circled sentences that gave me a feeling. Then I practiced retelling it in my own words. This is a story about a boy who feels small, but he does something small each day. And one day it becomes something big. That was how I explained it. I didn't try to sound impressive. I didn't aim for perfect grammar. I just wanted to be understood, to make my words mean something. That was my goal now, not to sound smart, but to connect. The day of the book circle came quickly. We sat in a circle, notebooks in hand. Ms. Parker looked around and smiled. "Who would like to start?" she asked. And before I could think twice, I raised my hand. Not from pressure, from something new. Confidence. She gave me a nod. "Go ahead, Ariel." I took a slow breath, looked at the faces around me and began. I held the book and started sharing the story, not reading it word by word, but retelling it with feeling. I explained how the boy reminded me of myself when I first came to New York, unsure, quiet, and scared. I talked about how he didn't change everything all at once. He did one small thing every day, and over time that small thing grew into something big. As I spoke, I saw people listening. Really listening. Really. Their faces were soft. They weren't judging me or correcting me. They were simply hearing what I had to say. I spoke slowly and clearly. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just telling the truth. When I finished, Ms. Parker looked at me and said, "That was beautiful, Ariel. Thank you for teaching us that even small actions can lead to big changes." That word teaching landed inside me. No one had ever said I taught something before. That word always felt too serious, but now it felt possible, because somehow I had done it. After class, Maria walked over to me and said, "I liked your story. It made me feel strong, like I don't need to be fast, just steady." Hiroshi came too. "I want to read that book," he said. "Maybe we can talk about it later." I smiled at both of them. We weren't just helping each other with grammar anymore. We were helping each other grow. We were becoming something more, a community. That evening, I met Anna at the cafe after her shift. We sat at our favorite corner table drinking tea. I told her everything, the story, the circle, the things Ms. Parker had said. Anna smiled warmly. "See," she said, "you're not just learning English, you're living it." Then she paused and added something that stayed with me. "One day, you'll write your own stories and maybe teach more people." I looked at her and asked, "You really think so?" She nodded. "I do." I sat with those words for a moment, quiet and thoughtful. That night, I didn't just open my journal. I opened a new notebook, one I had been saving. On the first page, I wrote a title, "Stories I Want to Tell." I didn't know what I'd write on the second page yet, but the first page already felt full of ideas, full of hope. Then I opened my regular journal and wrote, "Today, I shared a story in English." But I didn't just share words. I shared meaning. And that's what makes language powerful. And then I added something that felt true deep in my heart. Sometimes the learner becomes the guide, and you don't even realize it until someone thanks you for teaching them. Chapter 15. From Fear to Fluency. My journey so far. It was a quiet Sunday evening in New York. Outside my window, the sky was painted with shades of gold and gray, just like the city itself, full of light, full of life, yet sometimes soft and still. I sat at my desk and opened my journal. On the very first page, I had written, "I am scared, but I want to learn." I smiled. That line felt like a quiet voice from someone I used to be, someone unsure, full of questions, but ready to try. I thought back to that flight from Spain when I held my breath and held tight to my hopes. I remembered landing at the airport, speaking shaky English to strangers, and feeling completely lost in a place I had never seen before. Then I remembered meeting Anna, my roommate from Brazil, who became so much more than just a roommate. She became a sister, a teammate, a friend. I thought of our first day in class and how Miss Parker welcomed us with kindness. Her gentle words felt like an open door, giving me space to breathe again. Memories came back like waves. The loud streets, the messy subway map, the day I got lost, but found the courage to ask for help, cooking pasta with Anna, and learning to say, "pass the salt," sitting in class, listening to recordings that made no sense at first, and then listening again and again until something clicked. I thought of the long walks through Central Park, the museums, the books, and the signs I read slowly, word by word. I thought of the first English journal I kept, where I wrote down my day, my doubts, and my dreams. Every page was a small step forward. Then I remembered the job center, the interviews, and finally the cafe. I saw the faces of kind customers, heard their warm words, and felt for the first time like I belonged. I remembered the moment I stood in front of the class, holding photos from Spain, sharing my culture in a language that once made me freeze. I remembered how I told a story that touched someone else's heart, and how Ms. Parker said, "Thank you for teaching us." That sentence stayed with me. I sat there with all those memories and felt something bloom inside, not pride, but peace. I still wasn't perfect. I still made mistakes. But I was no longer afraid of them. I didn't feel the need to hide anymore. I had spoken up. I had worked. I had taught. I had lived in English. And that I realized is fluency. It's not about fast talking or fancy grammar. It's about real words, honest effort, a voice that keeps going even when it shakes. Later that night, I walked to the rooftop. The wind was cool and the city lights stretched far into the distance. Anna joined me. We didn't say much at first. Then she looked at me and said, "You've changed." I looked back and replied, "So have you." We stood side by side, both smiling. We didn't need to explain anything. We had come to New York to learn English, but what we found was bigger. We learned how to begin again, how to fall and get back up, how to speak with courage, not just with words, but with heart. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I did know this: I was no longer afraid. I was no longer alone, and I was no longer the same person who stepped off that plane weeks ago. I had become someone new, someone braver, someone who could finally say, "I speak English." And it changed my life. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like and share it with someone who's learning English too. Leave a comment. Have you ever felt afraid to speak in English like Ariel? I'd love to hear your story. I read every comment, and don't forget to subscribe so we can keep growing, learning, and living in English one brave word at a time.